From Kansas State University, this is Agriculture Today. Eric Atkinson here, and providing this week's cattle market segment out of Oklahoma State University, Derrell shortly. He'll talk about the faltering cattle market and the prospect for prices finding a floor soon, and he'll offer his latest thoughts on the renegotiation of the North American Free Trade Agreement. Also today, K-State's Dave Grieger will talk about his research work on the split-timed AI approach to cattle breeding as the potential next step in employing AI in beef genetics management. He'll talk about the potential advantages over fixed-time AI. And for this week's 4-H segment, K-State's Pam van Horn will preview the series of Kansas 4-H shooting sports state matches coming up in September. All this and more next on Agriculture Today.
Have you ever thought about where your food comes from? If you're thinking the grocery store, think again. Facts show that the American farmer feeds more than 129 people.
They are continually increasing and improving their operations. A wide variety of crops and livestock are grown in Kansas as well as the United States, providing food to your dinner plate.
Next time you see a farmer or rancher, thank them. For more information, contact K-State Research and Extension.
This Agriculture Today opens with the cattle market comments provided by our guest this week. He's out of Oklahoma State University, livestock economist Derrell. On the heels, Derrell, of another rough week for the fed cattle trade, the drop in cash and futures both. What is weighing on this market? How do you view that?
Well, I think we're still in this seasonal pattern for the most part. It's still summertime. We're still trying to get through this. We perhaps haven't seen a little bit of help here from, sort of the last summer holiday coming up here. So that's maybe a bit of an issue on the meat side of things. Yeah, and, of course, supplies are a little bit bigger. That's been the issue all along. Carcass weights are starting to increase seasonally. They're still below a year ago. And with that, combined with some increased slaughter, there's plenty of supply out there to keep some pressure on this market. So I think I consider it mostly a seasonal situation, but with some additional baggage, if you will, making it hard to come out of this seasonal slump.
Part of that you're alluding to, the slump in domestic beef demand. Cutouts fell fairly sharply last week. There's likely hope out there that we would see some bump in retail beef featuring coming up for Labor Day. That might help revive domestic demand, but right now that doesn't look so good.
It's sure been hard for this box beef market to find some footing in this thing. A couple of times it's looked like it was going to do it, and then it has slipped some more. So, in that respect, it does look like a little bit of weakness. Again, I think it's largely seasonal in nature combined with ample supplies. Particularly on the choice side of things, we've had extremely good grading percentages, and so with growing beef production and a growing percentage of that choice, it's put a lot of pressure on that choice box beef market, and we've certainly seen that.
Conversely, the feeder cattle market, at least at the Kansas auctions, seemed to have rebounded a bit last week, let's put it that way, which runs counter to what's been going on in the fed trade as of last week. Your thoughts there?
Well, I think the feeder cattle market has largely been stronger than expected much of the year, and a good chunk of that has been due to strong feedlot demand. Obviously, feedlots have placed a lot of cattle in the last 4 months, and that shows up as these stronger prices. We're waiting for the upcoming cattle on feed report, and we may see less of an increase, but probably still a year-over-year increase in placements that would allude to the fact that there's still strong feedlot demand for feeder cattle. Going forward, conditions, at least in the southern plains, have been cooler and wetter than normal, and that may set up the possibility for better fall grazing and going into winter grazing. So we may see some additional demand, especially on the lighter weight stocker-type cattle. I don't think that's kicked in yet, but I think it's something that may happen sooner than usual, perhaps this fall.
The prospect of wheat pasture demand for calves, do you have any sense of how that really might shape up this fall? Of course, weather will dictate a great deal of that.
Well, if you just look at the conditions right now, again, typically, at least down in Oklahoma, depending on how far north you get, at this time of the year, even if we have moisture most years, the soil temperatures are high enough that you can't get too excited about planting wheat to get it out early for grazing. And this year, that's a little bit different. I think producers can probably plant pretty much any time they want to. I don't know that it would be necessarily a good idea to plant this early, but they may be thinking about earlier than usual as a result of that. So you've got on the one hand the potential for, and other grass as well. Again, we've greened up a lot with the rains we've had recently, so native pastures are growing again. The introduced pastures, both the warm season, are growing again, so there's an opportunity to get some fall forage here in place. The other side of it is if you look at current prices in feeder cattle markets, based on the value of putting weight on cattle, from the lightweight to the heavier weight feeder cattle, it's still reasonably attractive. Values of gain are running right now plus or minus $1 a pound at today's prices. Of course, you've got to figure in then your expectations of where the market will be when you actually sell those cattle. But I'd say there's some potential there.
All right. And we will see how that manifests itself here in the coming weeks and what, again, weather allows in terms of establishing wheat pasture in the central and southern plains. Derrell, last week the renegotiation talks over the North American Free Trade Agreement opened up, and we've discussed this quite a bit building up to this point. Your latest thoughts there on where this is headed? It's in the early going, obviously, but there are some dynamics here that are very important for livestock producers in the U.S. to understand, and particularly when you think about the agreements with Canada. You might explain.
Well, I think in general, the livestock industry, cattle specifically, and even agriculture more broadly across the board really don't want to see massive changes in NAFTA. So I think our approach to this renegotiation is one kind of sort of holding our breath to make sure we don't mess up what already works pretty well for agriculture by and large. The one place in that, well, at least one of the places in agriculture where certainly the dairy industry would like to see some changes would be in terms of trying to open up the Canadian market a little bit more. That's going to be a very difficult prospect given the way that Canadian dairy industry is structured and has been for a long time. And so it's not really a simple thing for them to change the trade part of it without having much broader impacts in their industry. So that's going to be a tough one. And then, of course, as we try to negotiate other parts of NAFTA relative to manufacturing and jobs and labor issues and other things, again, those things can happen and may make some improvements. But agriculture, I think, is basically going to be interested in sort of preserving what we have in terms of the basic commodity trade parameters that we're operating under at this time.
And your fear, again, as you said before we went on the broadcast, is that if we get to pushing too hard on such things as dairy policy with Canada, that we may find ourselves trying to defend other parts of our trade, and it could really get into quite an exchange that would be unfavorable overall.
Well, I think that's right. I mean, everybody obviously is trying to look for something that protects their interests, and if we push very hard in some areas, particularly some of these more sensitive areas, I think you risk then some sort of attempts to have an offsetting impact in some other area that we're more sensitive to. So I think it's one that you have to approach very carefully. Hopefully we'll see that in terms of a more balanced and, kind of a comprehensive view rather than really focusing maybe on a few areas that could come back and backfire on us a little bit.
And you do have a great familiarity with our cattle trade and interaction with Mexico. There are things on the line there as well, are there not?
Well, the trade relationship between the U.S. and Mexico for cattle and beef has evolved dramatically in the last decade. And again, it's depending on how you look at it, I guess. But by and large, I think it's been a very productive one on both sides of the border. We import cattle from Mexico and have for a long time relative to their comparative advantage in cow-calf production. We export some beef to them and have for a long time. We've struggled a bit in that market, but we continue to do that. And then more recently, we've begun to import some beef as Mexico has evolved into a box beef technology system that allows them to ship products in different markets. And so we have these product flows that add value really on both sides of the border, which is what trade does well when it works right.
Well, the NAFTA renegotiation off and rolling. We will track it closely, of course. For this trading week ahead, Derrell, we do have, as you note, the Cattle on Feed report coming out this Friday. You're anticipating higher placements there, you say?
Well, I wouldn't be surprised if we don't see placements still up year over year. I don't think they'll be up anything like the last 4 months. If you remember, a month ago we had the shocking, unanticipated 16% year-over-year increase in placements. We're probably talking about a couple percent this time. And in fact, with a good marketing rate still in place, which has been there all along, we may actually see placements up less than marketings, which would actually pull back the cattle on feed inventory slightly. So we're not looking for, I think, anything as dramatic as what we had a month ago. But, again, we're still seeing the fact that there's more calves out there in the feeder cattle pipeline that are coming through the system.
In the meantime, can the market hold a floor this week, or will we see more weakness?
Well, it's been hard to get that floor in place, and it's really fed cattle and box beef are kind of operating together here. If we could get a floor and maybe a little bit of a late summer fall kick in box beef markets, that would probably help stabilize the fed cattle markets. I think feedlots are still quite current and all of that, so I don't think we have any real problems at the feedlot level. And we, historically, if we were going to create a summer problem or a problem with fed cattle markets seasonally, it was going to be in this late summer period. I don't see that as an issue now, so I think this market can stabilize and potentially start to show a little bit of footing here right away. Whether or not we're quite there, I think, is still a bit up in the air.
Well, let's hope it does transpire this week. Hey, Derrell, we always appreciate your thoughts. Thanks so much.
Anytime.
He is Derrell Peel, livestock economist, Oklahoma State University. And with those remarks on the cattle trading trends for this week, you're listening to Agriculture Today. After the break, we'll chat with a K-State beef reproductive physiologist about what they're learning in their research about the split-timed AI approach to cattle breeding. That's next, here on the K-State Radio Network.
Did you know every Kansas farmer feeds 128 plus people?
Kansas farmers are hard workers, dependable, authentic, and sensitive.
Not only do farmers put food on your table, but they put clothes on your back and fuel in your car.
For more information about Kansas farmers, visit K-State Research and Extension online or stop by your local extension office. This message has been brought to you by the K-State Animal Sciences Leadership Academy participants.
You're tuned in to Agriculture Today. Welcome back. Going to take a moment now to look at recent K-State research into the latest regarding artificial insemination of beef cattle, which is, of course, for many producers a staple of beef reproduction these days. We've invited over from the Animal Sciences and Industry Department here at K-State, beef cattle physiologist Dave Grieger. Dave, let's talk about, if we can put it in this way, the evolution of AI over the years. And you've been involved with a good number of these steps in progression. But we've come a long way, actually, have we not?
Yes. AI has been done for decades now, artificial insemination for beef cattle and dairy cattle. It's been, of course, almost universal and high percentage in the dairy industry, less so in the beef industry. But so it's been going on for decades, and we know timing of insemination is important, and from estrus observation from cattle, the classic AM-PM rule has worked just fine, and it still works well. If an animal enters estrus in the AM in the morning, breed her in the PM. If she doesn't come into heat until the evening or the PM, you breed her the following AM, so about approximately 12 hours. So, but of course, if you're checking estrus on all of your animals and you have a relatively large herd, that takes a lot of time. So estrus synchronization came along, where we can use some reproductive hormones that will help synchronize estrus and time of estrus and ovulation for cattle. And so that's very commonly used.
We've moved on, though, to something called timed AI, which is a more sophisticated step yet.
Right. And so just because estrus detection does take time for the last, it's been 10-plus years where this has really been popular, is timed AI, or sometimes it's called fixed timed AI, where the time of insemination is set beforehand, and usually almost universally that would be after, for instance, synchronization. If you used a CEDAR and prostaglandin, common synchronization protocols, the timing after removing the CEDAR and giving prostaglandin to individual animal, you would set up a time after that to breed her. So fixed time means you're not checking heat anymore. You're saving labor cost on that and time, and a lot of these ranches are diversified, and so if they can do this without spending a lot of time of checking heat day and night for a single insemination on one day for their cattle, it's beneficial.
As far as reproductive success of the herd, and you mentioned advantages in terms of labor management, are there other advantages as well?
Well, you get a little bit of a bump in overall pregnancy rate because for timed AI, if you had, say, 100 heifers you were breeding, they all come through the chute at the same time. Well, not the same time, but individually, but at the same day, and so they would be inseminated within a 2 or 3 hour period. And so some of those animals, of course, would not be in estrus, and you do not have a chance of them conceiving, but several of them you would not have caught in estrus anyway, and you, with the synchronization program, you've kind of induced them. So you get a little bit of a bump of overall pregnancy rate, and of course you get everything done in a single day for breeding that particular group of females.
Mm-hmm. What have we learned about timed AI in as far as disadvantages over the past decade or so?
Well, cost-wise, so every animal is set up to be synchronized, and then which would be, if you were checking observation, estrus observation, that would be the same. But of course, every animal, whether she's in estrus or not, for timed AI, you're paying for a straw of semen to go into her. And so there's a bit of more of a materials cost in that part of things. So it's one of those things where you always say it depends how it pencils out for a particular ranch, whether they want to get things done quick and pay a little more for material cost, but save on labor costs. So yeah, there's some specific details, but it does come down to money and what pencils out well for an individual ranch.
Sure, which makes perfectly good sense. But you have been, in your recent work, looking at still the next move in this direction of improving AI protocols here. This is called split-time AI. What is the concept?
So split-time AI has been tried in some university herds. We've done it here at Kansas State and other herds in the Midwest where some of the folks may be familiar if they breed cattle. There's estrus detection patches, and so that's an estrus detection aid. And there's been different things of those in the past, but a little more recently, these patches that go on, and they're kind of like a lottery scratch material, and so those go on just inside on the tail head of the heifer or cow. At the time they should be coming into estrus, and so if they're mounted, that's scratched off, and so it usually goes from a gray color to either bright pink or bright yellow. The producer has his choice on the color they like to use for that. So that indicates that animal was in heat, but once it's scratched off, it's a one-and-done thing, and so you don't know exactly when she came in. But using those to manage that, then you can sort of separate out groups on the split time where animals that come in early to estrus, and for example, generally after a synchronization protocol, you wait about 48 hours for animals to come into heat, and if they're in estrus at that time, those can be sorted off and inseminated at that time, and if their patch has not been activated for animals that are not in estrus by 48 hours, then we wait either to that evening or the following day for the second group to be inseminated, with hopefully giving them more time to come into estrus.
So this has some inherent efficiency advantages in as far as administering AI?
Yes. So and I think on a practical standpoint, we have done some work at different ranches, and if there's a large group of animals, you'd like to get them inseminated in a timed AI program within 3 or 4 hours. But if you've got 300, 400, depending on labor and facilities, you may not be able to get that done. So we've kind of tried to use this. Everyone in the group is set up the same. All the animals are set up the same. with the patches on there. And so this is an easy way to say, okay, we're breeding this part of the herd at 48 hours because they are in heat. And you've got cowboys, if they're sorting on horseback, it's easy to sort out a red patch from a gray patch. And so that's an easy sort for the animals to be bred that day. The others can be sorted off to be bred tomorrow. And so there's a little bit of management, and that you're trying to maximize the group that will conceive to insemination kind of according to when they're going to come into estrus.
Your initiative, in part, as far as testing this system out, though, has been clearly looking at conception rates, has it not?
That's true. And so we know that if an animal's in estrus, and so we will get 60 to 70% conception rate on insemination, which is very good for this timed AI on that particular group. But if they're not in heat, the same animals that have not been activated, and if they're bred at that same time, they may have a 30-40% conception rate. So overall, for timed AI, we're getting about 50%. We hope that by splitting up this in the first day and, say, the second day of insemination, we can get 60-some% in the first group, and then hopefully 60-some% in the second group. So overall, the number of AI calves that group will have is going to be increased by doing split time AI versus a single timed AI on a single day.
And you're in the midst of testing out that premise then.
We are, and there's other groups doing that. And just for example, we over the last couple of years, we've tried this with our university herds. We have a purebred herd and our commercial herd. It does tell us that to get animals into estrus is the key there, because we get, for example, we're at about 67% on a group we just did last year. But in those animals, if they're in estrus, they'll have that conception rate. If we wait and they're bred on the second day, it takes them another day to come into heat, we still get about 62-65% conception rate. But if they have not come into heat by that second day, where their patch is still gray, that's where we're down into 20 or 30% conception rate on that group. And that gets a little confusing, but that does say even though they haven't come into heat, the estrus sync programs do work, because we're still getting about a quarter of those to conceive, even though they have not shown estrus. And so the synchronization is working to sync them to ovulate. But, of course, you would never know that without using the estrus patches.
So still some studying to be done to confirm the best use of this approach, but it sounds like it might well be the next progressive step in beef breeding.
Yes, and so it's I would say it's a small, just trying to maximize things for producers. Input costs are always critical, and so it adds a little bit of cost to that. But, of course, every AI calf a producer can have will pay back to his operation. So it's somewhat incremental, but it is another management tool to use split-timed AI to hopefully improve overall AI conception rate for a beef herd.
And you'll be likely, as your work continues in this area, reporting at such things as Cattlemen's Day at K-State and so forth on your latest discoveries, Dave.
That's correct. We try to put these numbers out there, Cattlemen's Day report here at Kansas State, so producers can look at that. It's always difficult, so much variation between ranch to ranch and breeds and things like that, but our goal is to put out enough numbers on these trials over 2 or 3 years so producers can make intelligent choices based on some data that's similar to the animals that they're breeding in their herd.
It will be interesting to see how this fleshes out over time and over multiple trials, as you'll be continuing to refine this method of breeding beef animals, cows and heifers, that is split time AI. And we appreciate you letting us know how it works and what you're looking at, Dave. Thanks for your time.
You're very welcome, Eric. Good to be here.
He is a beef cattle physiologist. K-State's Department of Animal Sciences and Industry is Dave Grieger. He's been our guest on this part of agriculture today. We'll step aside now for a few moments. After this break, we'll return with more here on the K-State Radio Network.
Eat today? Thank a farmer. A way to get more involved in agriculture is through 4-H and FFA. Through 4-H and FFA, we have been given multiple opportunities to grow as leaders and learn more about agriculture.
You can learn skills related to jobs, public speaking skills, and you get the opportunity to travel around the country and meet new people.
If you want more information about getting more involved in 4-H and FFA, visit them on their websites at kansasffa.org and kansas4h.org.
You're tuned in to Agriculture Today over the K-State Radio Network. Eric Atkinson here as we check on today's agricultural news headlines for you now, courtesy in part of DTN. Well, late last week, U.S. Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer conveyed the United States' concern about Japan's recent imposition of emergency tariffs on frozen beef from the U.S. and from other countries. Lighthizer raised the issue of the so-called safeguard tariffs, under which Japan boosted the rate to 50% from 38.5% for the period from 1st of August to March 31st next year. That in a meeting with Japanese Foreign Minister Taro Kono in Washington. Here's more from the USDA's Rod Bain.
Several ag commodity groups have stated that a top priority for any future U.S. bilateral free trade deal should be with Japan. Kent Backus of the National Cattlemen's Beef Association says, for instance,
Japan's our biggest export market. Last year we sold $1.5 billion worth of U.S. beef to Japanese consumers. We still face a 38.5% tariff.
Where a U.S.-Japan bilateral trade agreement could reduce or eliminate such tariffs, including a recent Japanese safeguard imposition that increases U.S. frozen beef exports to that market. And while a Thursday meeting between U.S. Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer and Japan's foreign minister did not produce announcement of any bilateral free trade agreement negotiations, it did result in announced acceleration of discussions on specific bilateral trade issues, such as beef, as well as the exploration of approaches to strengthen free and fair trade between the two nations. I'm Rod Bain reporting for the U.S. Department of Agriculture in Washington, D.C.
Now, in a separate meeting, Japan's Kono and U.S. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson agreed that despite the U.S. withdrawal from the Trans-Pacific Partnership free trade deal back in January, it's vital, they said, that the two countries lead the economic order in the Asia-Pacific region. Kono and Tillerson concurred that Tokyo and Washington should step up cooperation in maintaining a free and open order that propels the stability and the prosperity of the region. Meantime, negotiators from the U.S. and South Korea will be meeting this week in Seoul, a session that's to discuss potentially amending the 5-year-old U.S.-Korea Free Trade Agreement. The sides will engage in talks starting tomorrow. Robert Lighthizer and South Korean Trade Minister Kim Hyung-chang will open the talks via video conference, to be followed then by senior-level talks between U.S. and Korean officials again in Seoul. South Korea's trade ministry said it would maintain its stance that deal has been mutually beneficial and that both sides should first objectively examine, analyze, and assess the pact before attempting to make changes or amendments. Lighthizer has said the overall deficit the U.S. has with South Korea has increased since the agreement took effect. Well, cattle producers, we want to remind you of those two Kansas Livestock Association K-State Ranch Management Field Days, which are on the agenda for this week, tomorrow and Wednesday, to be precise. The one tomorrow will take place in Washington County. That'll start around 3:30 tomorrow afternoon at the Diedrich Family Farms near Greenleaf. The Diedrichs have utilized a dry lot and semi-confinement system for a portion of their cow herd since 2011. Mark Diedrich will be sharing his experiences with designing the functional pens and the feeding areas and for preparing low-cost rations for cows and calves in the dry lot. Attendees will have the chance to tour those facilities. Also on the program, Oklahoma State University livestock entomologist Justin Talley. He'll be discussing the latest on fly and tick control for beef cattle operations. K-State Extension beef veterinarian A.J. Tarpoff will be on hand to report on how to identify and detect anaplasmosis infections. He'll also provide management suggestions to help control or minimize incidences of that disease in Kansas cow herds. And the field day again starting tomorrow afternoon, registration at 3:30. It'll conclude with a free beef dinner at 6:45 tomorrow evening. Diedrich Family Farms located south of Greenleaf in Washington County. Look for the directional signs along U.S. Highway 77 south of Waterville, as well as along K9 Highway west of Waterville. And then the DL Cattle Company of Fredonia will be hosting the final 2017 KLA K-State Ranch Management Field Day on Wednesday, August the 23rd. Joe and Helen Donahue and their son and daughter-in-law, Derrell and Jody, will be the hosts. The program highlight will be a presentation on controlling invasive species in native grasslands, including Sericea lespedeza, with late summer prescribed burning. From the Kansas Department of Wildlife, Parks, and Tourism, John Johnson will tell about his work with late summer prescribed burning and high-intensity, low-duration rotational grazing on 1,700 acres of the Woodson County Wildlife Area. And K-State's Casey Olson will join him on the program to share Casey's findings on using late-season burning to control Sericea on a northern Flint Hills ranch. And there'll be much more to the program. That field day starts again at 3:30 in the afternoon. It'll conclude at 6:45 as well. The location for the DL Cattle Company Field Day, a pasture north of Fredonia in northwestern Wilson County. For directions or more information on either of these field days, go to kla.org, kla.org. Now, this week's edition of Tree Tales. Here's K-State Forester Charlie Barton. Charlie?
Smokey Bear just turned 73 in August, but he still has no plans to retire. What started out as an ad council campaign to be on the lookout for forest fires in World War II has turned into the longest-running, most successful public service message in history. A national survey showed that Smokey's original motto, "Only you can prevent forest fires," was recognized by 95% of adults. Smokey has been modernized a bit over the years. In 2001, his motto was updated to say, "Only you can prevent wildfires," which reflects the reality that many of our most damaging fires are occurring in grassy brushlands and not actually in the forest. And of course, Smokey also has a website at smokeybear.com. The site has several sections, including a new feature that shows where wildfires are currently burning across the nation. It also has information on protecting your home from wildfire and several very funny 30-second videos with a fire prevention message. Again, that website is smokeybear.com. Each year, some new television ads are developed, so look for the PSAs during your favorite shows. This year, the new spots open with a landscape on fire, and then it rewinds to show the cause of that blaze, such as parking a car with hot exhaust pipes in tall, dry grass, or having trailer tow chains drag and throw off sparks. The problem is corrected under Smokey's watchful eye, and the fire is prevented. The runtime of these spots is only about 15 seconds, so do not blink or you may miss it. I really like the dramatic PSAs shown on the website last year. In each of these, a slightly menacing bear shadow would appear, and then the person would take the correct safety action and get a hug from Smokey. You may also see some of these earlier PSAs playing on the television shows. You've been listening to Tree Tales. I'm Charles Barden, a forester with K-State Research and Extension.
Thanks, Charlie. And this is Agriculture Today.
Have you ever wondered why livestock producers burn Kansas pasture? Here's the deal. Controlled burning helps preserve the prairie and allows every bite feeder cattle eat to be the most nutritious. National Wildlife and Parks also feel it is a necessity to help with wildlife populations.
So the next time you see a Kansas pasture burning, know it's for the good of our wildlife, our prairie, and our livestock. This message was brought to you by the K-State Animal Sciences Leadership Academy participants.
Agriculture Today closes out now for this Monday with our weekly segment on the Kansas 4-H program. There are key events aligned with the 4-H Shooting Sports Project that we will tell you about today. Pam van Horn is on the phone with us, Research and Extension 4-H specialist at K-State who supervises the shooting sports activities. And before we talk about the 3 state matches, which will tie off this project year for shooting sports, Pam, remind folks of the nature of this project and just how immensely popular it's become in recent years.
You're so right, Eric. The shooting sports program has grown tremendously. There is an excitement and an eagerness to learn how to shoot firearms, whether it be archery or shotgun or rifles. And the primary purpose of this is that we can educate young people on the safety aspects of handling a gun and shooting a gun or just carrying their archery equipment. You would think that we're really into the competitive nature and sport of it, but we're really more about the proper way of handling and shooting. And I think it's growing because it's an instant reaction. Mm-hmm. A young person, whether it's the archery and the arrow hitting the target, or whether it's they're shooting an air rifle and they're hitting the target, it's just that excitement that they can hit the target.
And it's pretty obvious, as folks would listen, that certified instructors are the ones administering the training for these young people.
You're correct. To be able to teach a young person in 4-H, our volunteers need to attend a certified training. We offer training once a year at Rock Springs in the spring that we offer all the disciplines, and we've tried to offer in the fall a regional training so that we can get more adult volunteers trained up so they can train the young people in the correct methods of shooting and the safety. And it's an intensive training because they need to have so many hours of credit to become certified.
And as we review briefly the calendar year for the Shooting Sports Project, building up to this point where the state matches are directly ahead, what have young people who participate in shooting sports been doing? They've been learning, they've been practicing, so forth?
They've been doing all of that, and we look at shooting sports as two seasons, a spring season and kind of the fall season, and we're into the wrapping up of the fall season that is similar to the 4-H year that will conclude in September also.
So as far as qualifying for the state matches, have the young people been competing, or is this an open door for all interested participants?
In the shooting sports, because we want to offer a good quality state match, we have qualifying matches throughout these seasons. So they've been participating and attending qualifier matches since early May to get the qualifying score so they can compete in the 3 matches for this fall.
So roughly, any given year, how many young people would qualify for state, to put it that way?
We're right at about 300.
So, Pam, as we look ahead now to the month of September, there are 3 state matches, actually at 4 locations coming up for the respective shooting sports. Tell us about what's ahead.
Okay, we have 3 major events in the month of September, and it's exciting because we have a new venue for our archery state match, and it will be at the Smoky Valley Archery Range in Lynchburg, Kansas. And so we're looking forward to that, and that's on the 16th of September. Then the following week, we are focusing on the shotgun and those activities that are involved in the shotgun, and that is trap, skeet, and sporting clays. And then the following Saturday will be what we call the small bore, which includes the rifles, the pistols, and the muzzle loading. So there's 3 totally different venues that are being offered.
Mm-hmm. And noting here that the shotgun, sporting clays, those will be in the Wichita area, a part of it at Keachai on the 23rd of September, the other at Augusta on the 24th, right?
Yes, that is correct.
And then the small bore, muzzle loader, pistol, that'll take place in Topeka on September the 30th.
Mm-hmm.
Registration for all of those, though, due by a single date, right?
Yes, that date is September 1. Those registrations are to the Kansas State 4-H office, and those registrations are made online by either the extension agent or the local shooting sports coordinator.
But shooting sports participants and parents, they need to make sure that those folks are taking care of registration right away. So follow up on that.
Yes, we encourage them to be visiting with those individuals that will be registering so that no one gets left out.
And lastly, if one would want to attend one of these, if they're in those respective areas and would like to learn more about shooting sports, these state matches are quite a spectacle, aren't they, Pam?
Oh, yes. It's a great opportunity to learn more about the shooting sports program. You can watch it firsthand. So if you have any interest at all, drop by one of the locations and just watch. Again, Lindsborg, September the 16th. Keachai/Augusta in the Wichita area, September the 23rd and 24th, and Topeka, September the 30th, for the various shooting sports activities at the state matches for those project areas. And Pam, we always like to hear about another success story in Kansas 4-H, and shooting sports definitely one of those. Thanks for your time.
It's good to be with you, Eric.
Pam van Horn there. She's a research and extension 4-H specialist for K-State. Again, if you'd like to find out more about shooting sports, go to kansas4h.org. And we do have one last county fair on the calendar to wrap up this season, and that is the Seward County Fair in Liberal, starting tomorrow and running through Sunday, completing the county fair schedule for 2017. And that concludes today's edition. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll be right back here this same time tomorrow, and hope you will as well. Until then, Eric Atkinson here. This has been Agriculture Today over the K-State Radio Network.